Hi, it's Lizzie Carroll here from Lizzie Carroll Doula Services, your VBAC mentor and birthy bullshit sorter-outerer. This is mini masterclass number 2. Now, I'm aiming to keep these mini masterclasses really short, which means I'm not going to be able to cover everything during them, but I will do my best. If you would like me to clarify any points, or you would like me to give you some additional information, or you have any questions at all, just let me know. You can either comment on wherever you see this video, or you can send me an email at lizzie@lizziecarroll.com.au. Today's topic is the phrase, I have no choice. Now, I hear this phrase in two ways. One is a self-imposed, I have no choice. And I'm going to talk about that when I start talking about our own birthy bullshit and the ways we, I guess, diminish our own power. Today, I want to talk about it in the context of care providers telling us that we have no choice. For example, we don't allow VBAC, so you must have a caesarean. We don't allow breech vaginal birth, so you must have a caesarean. We don't allow ECV, which is where they turn a breech baby head down. So you must have a caesarean. And these are examples that I see all the time. I would say at least a couple of times a week, there is a post in the VBAC Australia support group that I run where a woman has been told by her care provider that she must book in a caesarean because she has no choice, because they don't provide the care that she wishes to have. Now, I do have notes, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. Something that we really need to take into account, and I want to get this out of the way first, is that this is assault. It takes away a woman's ability to provide consent, because if you can't say no, if you have no options, if you're just being told you must have a caesarean, there's no legally valid consent there. It's assault, and we need to start referring to it as such. Doesn't matter if it's a hospital policy, doesn't matter if it's just an individual care provider, it is still assault. And I would really love to see women using this term, my care provider wants to assault me. My hospital has policies which encourage care providers to routinely assault women. We need to start using this sort of language because A, it's legally factual. This is the legal language of it. And also because it will start to move us from, oh, it's just a doctor trying to look after a woman, and move us back into, out of that patriarchal and completely patronizing, absolutely ridiculous space of doctors must rescue us women and our murderous uteri, and move us back into a space of women being fully capable of making decisions and fully autonomous people, human beings. When your hospital decides that you have no choice, that you must have a caesarean rather than, say, a breech birth, your hospital is telling you that they would prefer you to take on the physical risks of surgery rather than them take on the legal liability of providing you with the care that you want. As we talked about in the last masterclass, there is a difference when it comes to risk around the legal risk that the hospital has and the physical risks that women are exposed to when we start to bring in interventions into a healthy pregnancy. Particularly when it comes to something like breech birth, your hospital is saying they would rather you take on the short and long-term physical and emotional risks associated with a caesarean rather than train their staff. Seriously. And I had a great quote from one of the women in my recent group VBAC mentoring program, where she said, why should I have surgery because of your incompetence? And this, I think, is where we need to bring this in. If your hospital is saying that you need to have surgery rather than a breech vaginal birth, which has been shown time and again to be safer for women, breech vaginal birth is safer for women than a cesarean and is as safe for babies, as long as your care provider is appropriately trained. Now we need to get the hospitals to start appropriately training their staff. And if we start talking about it in terms of why should I take on the physical risks associated with a cesarean when you could just train your staff to provide appropriate support and appropriate care to women, then we will start to actually move forward. And if it's really early in your pregnancy when you start to have these conversations, you can actually say, well, get your staff trained. Like, I'm here telling you this is what I want. I'm going to have a breech vaginal birth. If my baby is breech, I will have a breech vaginal birth. You've got 20 weeks to get your staff trained to be able to provide support for that. I'm going to have a VBAC after 2 cesareans. Here I am at my 15-week booking in appointment telling you this. If training is an issue, get your staff trained. You've got heaps of time. These are conversations that we can start having. If your hospital is absolutely adamant, no, we cannot provide this service for you. No, we will not train our staff. No, we will not do this. You have a cesarean or nothing. They need to refer you to someone else. If you've come in and you've said, you're 36 weeks and you want an ECV, and they've said, nope, we don't do that, you can say, well, you need to get me someone who will. They need to either bring in a consultant, an obstetrician, somebody who will provide that service for you, or they need to refer you and provide travel costs, pay travel costs for you to go to another hospital to have that done. Same if you want a VBAC or a VBAC after 2 cesareans, or whatever it is that you want, they need to refer you on, and they need to pay the costs, the travel costs, the accommodation costs. And we see this a lot in regional centres. For example, women birthing across Cape York, because there are no birthing services across the Cape, they come to Cairns to give birth, usually. And for some reason, the government, Queensland Health, have decided that that is a better option than just, providing support for women to birth on country, or providing support for women to birth, in their local communities. So Queensland Health has to pay those travel costs. They pay accommodation costs for as long as the woman needs to be in Cairns with access to the hospital and the birthing services. This is the same no matter where you are. If your local hospital, your local community cannot provide or is refusing to provide the care that you want, they need to refer you on. So what sorts of things can you do if you find yourself in this situation? You can contact Maternity Choices Australia or Maternity Consumer Network, or whoever the consumer representative, consumer advocacy group is in your area. If you contact them, they can get in touch with the hospital, with your care provider. They know what legislation to quote. They know what policies to quote. They know what to say to get the hospital to, get their shit together, basically. It's a good way of taking you a little bit out of this equation. You don't need to go and do the research. You don't need to be sitting there in the room alone with a care provider with that power imbalance, and it makes it a little less confrontational. You can just ask for a referral. If they are refusing to provide the care that you want, you can say, fine, just give me a referral to someone who will. Your hospital needs to find that person who will. You are not responsible for doing that research. unless you have somebody in mind that you would specifically like a referral to. They need to provide the referral. They need to provide the forms for you to get patient transport costs reimbursed and all of that sort of stuff. That is their responsibility. You can start to get a little bit more confrontational. I recommend writing letters to hospital administration, to the CE, to your health minister, to your local members, using some of that strong language I spoke about before, talking about, you know, this hospital is denying me my legal right to informed consent. They are telling me that I need to take on the risks of a cesarean, which include, you know, risks, immediate risks, death, pulmonary embolisms, hemorrhage, infection, long-term infection, risks to future pregnancies. Every cesarean that you have increases your chances of placenta accreta and placenta previa, as well as secondary infertility. Like, there's a huge range of risks that come up. And that's just the ones that I can think of, like, off the top of my head. When you look at the form that you have to sign, or that you should be signing to give consent to a cesarean, it's huge. There are a lot of risks that need to be talked through there. So getting in touch with the powers that be and letting them know that your hospital is forcing you to undertake these risks rather than provide you with something as reasonable as breech vaginal birth or something as reasonable as VBAC after 2 cesareans. Like, this is just something that we need to start getting out there. And we need to use that, you know, that strong language around assault and around the routine assault of women, which is what these policies are. Something to consider is that some hospitals will tell you that they cannot provide a VBAC. They can't allow you to have a VBAC because they do not have emergency support on site 24/7. They don't have an anaesthetist on site 24/7. They don't have an obstetrician on site 24/7. Firstly, many private hospitals across Australia do not have an obstetrician or an anaesthetist or emergency care on site 24/7. If you have an emergency in a private hospital in the middle of the night, they have to call people in. Just like what would happen in these rural hospitals, if you had an emergency in the middle of the night, they would have to call people in. Yet a lot of women don't really understand that when they're making these decisions around choosing care providers. If your hospital cannot provide emergency care, they have no business providing birthing care. As a woman planning a VBAC, yes, you have the additional risk of uterine rupture. It's a lower risk than, say, cord prolapse or placental abruption in a first-time mum. Most uterine ruptures are picked up early, particularly if the woman has one-to-one midwifery care and is actually listened to. They're picked up with heaps of time. If your hospital cannot provide care simply on the basis of your potential for uterine rupture, then they can't provide care. Like, how do they provide care for women who experience cord prolapse where, you know, they actually have to get into surgery like immediately? That is an immediate emergency, generally requiring women to get into surgery far quicker than, you know, the hospital picking up potential uterine rupture. So it is really important to have these conversations. How can a hospital say that they cannot support vaginal birth after cesarean, but they can give you a cesarean, which comes with a massive amount of risks? You know, if they can't provide emergency care to birthing women in the middle of the night, can they provide emergency post-operative care? What's going to happen if you start bleeding out at 2 in the morning? These are really important questions to ask when you're having these conversations with your care providers. And these are really important things to start contemplating when you're talking about these things. So that's it. I have no choice. Yes, you do. There are definitely tips and techniques that you can try to work through this. Seek support if you need to. It is always worth making sure you have support. I know that things like lodging complaints and having conversations and writing letters, some of this stuff can be really confronting and really difficult. I provide support in this space if you need it, either in a one-off session or as a part of my VBAC mentoring, a part of preparing for your next birth. I can support you through this, and our maternity consumer groups can also support you through these processes. I would love to hear any feedback that you have. Have you found yourself in this situation where your hospital has told you that you have no choice but to accept whatever it is they're wanting you to have, generally a caesarean? And how did you deal with that? Did you find some support? What sorts of techniques did you use to deal with that? What sort of support would you have liked to have had to work through that? That's it for today's mini masterclass. As always, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your stories. I would love to hear your questions. If you have ideas around around other topics that you would like me to do mini masterclasses on, let me know. That's it. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye for now.